Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about financial wellness, and we're going to look at different life cycles and events, and we're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are usually more about the emotions associated with your finances than the finances themselves. And if we are healthy emotionally, then we are tending to make better, sound financial decisions, which is always a good thing. Although we might be somewhat general and fairly broad in our discussion, we'd love to hear from you and make it more relevant. And today's topic especially, I think, is one that so many people have so many questions about and so many misunderstandings about and misconceptions. So please reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial, or you can post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or anywhere else that you might be listening. A quick PSA, a public service announcement. 4 weeks from today is the filing deadline for the IRS and states, generally the states. So please, if you have any questions, reach out, but also get prepared and get moving. So going through a divorce is difficult. There's a lot of great information out there that you can learn from, but I always stress to my clients that your situation is unique. Make sure the information you are relying on is relevant to you. So why do I say that your situation is unique? It's because you are unique. And couple that with the fact that the person that you are divorcing is also unique. Now, it's always better if you can to go through a divorce in an amicable fashion. It generally is cheaper, less draining. It allows you to move forward quicker. Unfortunately, not all divorces are amicable. Many are contentious. And what I'm about to say might not be received well by everybody, but I think it's important to say that everybody who has a contentious divorce is not necessarily divorcing a narcissist. They may be a narcissist, but not everybody is. They may have tendencies of narcissism. They may be difficult people. They may be acting like a child. Why am I focusing on these minutiae? It's because whether they are a narcissist or not, you have to deal with them. Today's guest has probably done more research on contentious divorces and narcissism than anyone else I've ever met. Tracy Malone is one of the most knowledgeable people to guide you through this. She is an author of many books. She is a presenter. She's a creator of narcissist abuse support. She has a depth of knowledge. I've learned so much from her websites, from conversations with her. So I do encourage you to continue listening, to reach out, to go to her website. And I just want to quote one thing here from your website, that your goal is to help people be a surthriver, which, by the way, I love that. Tracy, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So one of the things we're going to talk about is the mistakes, and we'll get to that in a while, because there are many mistakes that people might not be aware of when dealing with a narcissist. But I think there's so much ground we need to cover before that, to be honest, to really get us to understand why the mistakes that people make are mistakes, or really what they're dealing with. The first thing I'm going to ask, if you can share a little bit about your background, so people, the listeners, can really understand where you're coming from, and you have a tremendous passion around what you do. So if you could share a little, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Thank you. So I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and I went through a divorce almost 10 years ago. And next month, it will be 10 years since I divorced my ex.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Freedom. But I didn't know what I was dealing with when I was going through the divorce. The house had already been sold. The money was in escrow in one of the lawyer's office. Pretty simple, clean cut, not his child. There was not much to fight over except for alimony. And when that part came up, I ended up with 7 trials. We were fighting over $50,000, so my half was 25, and it cost me $100,000 to get divorced. And the judge called it the most tortured divorce in our town's history. So it gives you a reflection of the torture that I went through. And at that point, no one ever said the word. I was a therapist. I had lawyers that probably knew. No one ever said it to me to point me in the right direction to understand what was going on. And I survived. Luckily, got through it and lost everything I had and had to rebuild my life again. But it was a couple years later when I had dated a man after the divorce, and I found out what a narcissist was the hard way. And I had repeated the patterns, thinking it was a different flavor, different person. It wasn't the same kind of thing. But that's where I really learned my lesson. And that's where I really had to wake up to this. And I was shocked. I was 55 years old. I said, how could I possibly not know this? How could all these people who are here to help me and I'm paying them not give me the words? So when I met that man and learned about it, I then put the reflection on myself. But why me? What am I doing here? And then the deeper I dug, the more I realized I was raised by a narcissist. I always knew my family was crazy. Everyone I know knows my family was crazy, but we never had the words. So that when I read that and I started reading about adult children of narcissists, that opened light bulbs and everything just kind of, okay, your life has just been explained in, 20 books. And so the more work I did, the more I wanted to help people. And I started by starting a support group for myself because I needed support. And I wanted to see if there were other people in this strange spot I was in. And it grew and it grew, and it would be 40 people in a room and people driving 2 hours to come to it. So I built a second group, and then I had 60 people down south and 40 people up north. And I just kept learning and seeing that you could have a narcissistic landlord. I never imagined that because I was in the relationship and family pool, right? So the more I did, the more I studied, the more I wanted to help them. The more I studied how to heal, how to set boundaries, and I started teaching them that. So that's how I started getting going. And my son, who was in college at the time, said, Mom, you should make a video, a vlog. And I'm like, what's a vlog? And I never imagined. So I said, if my stupid story can help one person, that would make it all worth it. So
I cannot imagine, as you're reading, as you talking to people, all the light bulbs that must have been going off through your entire life, explaining how you got to the point where you were. And it's amazing sometimes, we go through life and we know, and this is our normal, right? So we don't understand any different. And I think that once you realize this isn't normal, this is something different, it's incredible how that is almost like a launching pad to help us get to that next stage. But I love that, there's that phrase, a rising, what lift as you rise, bring people with you and you've done that, which not everybody is always able to do or have that strength to get through something like that. So that's a huge credit. And I think sometimes people are throwing buzzwords around in the divorce world. We hear, a couple I would say that we hear really are contentious divorce and narcissist. I think sometimes people, as you mentioned, you kind of were desensitized to contentious behavior through your marriage or your relationship because it had been happening for so long. So I'm going to ask you, can you kind of define what is a narcissist and what is a contentious divorce?
Sure. Well, any divorce with a narcissist is contentious. We'll just leave it there on that one. But
Very true.
I actually wrote it in my book because it's such a common mistake to call someone by their disorder. You don't call, she's a bipolar, she's a it's not like we label them with the name. There is no such human as a narcissist. It's a personality disorder that leaves them without empathy, that leaves them, very manipulative, very controlling, often deep-seated anger that you might not see, and they come in different flavors. This was my problem. I saw one flavor, oh, I got it now, and I never expected the other kind of flavor, which is sort of the overt, covert, malignant narcissist. It's on a spectrum, right? I have a red flag checklist on my website, and people will call me up and go, well, I checked like 80 of them, but there were 5 they weren't, so they must not be. And I'm like, some lie, some don't lie, some only lie, some cheat, some don't cheat, some hide money, some don't. It's just the tactics that they use are very flexible. So, an overt narcissist is the kind that I would call grandiose in very, very other ways that people say it, that it's almost flamboyant. You can see it. It's all about them, and they're the star, and they have to have the spotlight. And that's really easy to pick up. It's what we call the covert narcissist, was both of mine were, where to the public, and even I bought the story because that's how I'd been raised. They're so kind and so generous and so sweet. And when you're with other people, they raise you up and they show everyone how much they love you. And the door closes and the people go home and they turn into angry beasts. And, you get in trouble for things you might have said or done, and you're always never enough. So, the coverts are a lot harder to really identify, because on the face, they're the soccer coach and everybody loves them. And then they turn around, and as soon as the door closes, let's say they were the soccer coach and they get the kids back in the car and they're picking them apart because they missed the ball and they embarrass them. And, their ego is huge. They don't want to be perceived as what they really are. So they create a mask, which is sort of this false impression that they give to the world. And behind closed doors, it's different.
And you had mentioned the checklist on your website. You had mentioned don't call them a narcissist, which is, if I remember correctly, number 1 on your top 10 list of mistakes that people make. These are just some of the resources I want to point out for people listening. These are just some of the resources that you can see on narcissistabusesupport.com, which is the website that we are referring to. And I think spending some time there will be very enlightening for a lot of people. I know it was for me. I'm not just saying, from a professional standpoint, seeing a lot of the things, that I think I deal with people whose spouses have this. I deal with some of my clients who have this, but it was quite opening for me. And I learned a lot from it. So I can imagine somebody who has been desensitized to all of this, as they read through it, can help themselves in identifying why they are where they are, which I think is the best starting point for somebody to move forward. So,
yeah.
So why are narcissist divorces? We talk about their personality and they're difficult and they come in different flavors, but why is a narcissistic divorce worse than a normal divorce?
Well, a narcissist deploys something in the psychological world called black and white thinking. And you're either good or you're evil. There's the fact that you were married for 25 years and you've got 5 children. There's none of that. You either are okay and they'll tolerate you, or when a narcissistic injury happens, which is a divorce, they're going to have to pay money. It's going to bring shame. They're going to, look like this to the world. So getting a divorce from a narcissist deploys the black and white thinking, and you go right, do not pass go, right to evil. And so their ego got so wounded, even if it was their idea or they were cheating and it caused it. This injury propels them to make you the arch enemy number 1. And their sole goal is to destroy you, not just get a divorce, let's split our assets, like my 7 trials. Like, what are we fighting over here? It was one false allegation after another, and it was just all an act. And he had money, so it was no problem for him to drop. He probably dropped $200,000 with 7 lawyers at his table, as if I was some sort of murderer. So that's the kind of level that you'll get to with someone who puts you in the black and white thinking. That's why they're worse. Their ego gets injured, and they're out for blood.
Well, I will say from an ego perspective, I think he may have won the number of attorneys at a single table representing somebody. So hopefully that boosts the ego a little bit for him over there. One of my favorite lines that I don't even remember whether I made it up, heard it, but is that from a narcissist perspective, they are never wrong and always wronged.
Victim.
And I find that when you say that to somebody who is desensitized, all of a sudden that's a big light that sheds like, yeah, that's a lot of what I experience. And what you're saying makes so much sense, because I think so much of it is that facade to the outside world. And when they kind of step into your house and see what really happens, they blown away by, who is this person? What's going on here? This is not who I know, right? So how does, and I'm not saying we're trying to expose the world, to who this person is, but how does somebody take that into account, right? I think really what I'm getting at is, what do people need to consider when contemplating going through, divorcing a narcissist, or the narcissist maybe is the one that initiates it. But these are the things that they're dealing with. How do they manage that? What are some of the things that they've really got to think through when going through a divorce or contemplating a divorce?
Well, I think you have to be able to identify who you're dealing with. Like, I didn't understand it, so I fought too many battles. That, again, false allegations. I'm not a thief. I'll fight that for $20,000. I'll take another one for $20,000. It was just because I didn't know what I was dealing with. If I had the words, if I had the strategies, the tactics, I would go, oh, this is what they do. Okay, I'm not going to fight that. Lawyer, what should we do about this one? Does that matter? Does this matter? Not knowing who you're dealing with is a huge disadvantage. And you talked earlier about labeling them, diagnosing a narcissist, right? And nobody can diagnose a narcissist unless the narcissist is at a psychologist's office 3 to 4 times a week for 2 or 3 years. Oh, wow. It's not going to be something that we can just stick the label on. But if the behaviors line up with what you're doing, if the way that they've treated you throughout the relationship lines up with what you can read and start to understand, then I say we proceed with that understanding and get through it with that ladder to hold on to, versus I don't know what they're calling and I don't want to call them that because that's mean. Okay, well, it may seem mean. You're not necessarily going up to their face. Like you just said, don't call them a narcissist. That's the kiss of death. They'll get really angry. That causes the narcissistic injury we spoke of. So just having the words to understand is going to be a huge difference. And getting, reading books on divorcing a narcissist for what strategies and tactics and behaviors to expect are going to make it a lot less emotional and less about, oh gosh, we've been married for 40 years. How could he do this to me? Our children, all of that sort of stuff is, of course they're now in defense mode to save their money, to save their future, and to wipe you out and get as little as possible. And so if you have the words and the tools, you're going to be able to do a lot better.
And one of the things I find, correct me if I'm wrong, but talking through emotions is never going to get you anywhere. Saying, I feel, I believe, because you're always wrong, right? So it's really got to, and when I'm in a situation where I'm working with a client, I tend to guide them by saying, we really need to show them like the dollars. We need to show them the exact, whether it's a statement from a bank that says, as of yesterday, there was $30,000 in that account. It's difficult to argue that, versus I think I deserve, or whatever it might be. Does that make sense? And how, it's a difficult one because, as you said, there are different flavors of narcissism, but how do people communicate that a little bit more to the professionals they're working with? For example, the attorney who might be the one leading that negotiation for them.
Yeah. And that's a hard one because some attorneys do understand it, but they are even the last person in the world to give that diagnosis. They're not diagnosing, but they don't even like you even talking about that word because they can't diagnose. It's lots of legalities. So, in the legal world, it's a high conflict divorce, and with maybe a suspicion that someone has NPD, but it's hard to let them understand. But as the tactics and the strategies start coming out, you can educate your lawyer if they're completely clueless.
Right.
Because if you don't let them know, again, give them my book, educate them on what strategies they might be seeing. They've represented them before, and they've defended people against them before. And that's what you're looking for in an attorney, to just say, what do you know about this? Again, I'm not saying I want you to have a PhD in personality disorders, but what can I expect with someone like this? And what have you seen in the past? And how would you defend me if this was happening, and my goals are, and how do we get to those goals?
So you touched on a couple things that after the break I do want to come back to, is goals and identifying or communicating with that attorney in that way. So I'm just making a note here to come back to that. But I am going to ask if you can share a quick, how do people get in touch with you or reach you on your website, so that they can reach out and learn more before we go to the break?
Sure. So if you go to my website, narcissistabusesupport.com, you will find all of my social media. You'll find my contact information, my coaching information, courses, and all kinds of, I have, I think 700 or 800 pages of resources. So, poke around there and get lost in that rabbit hole, and find me on social media. I have a big Facebook group with 17,000 members. If you're really needing some support 24/7, somebody will be there to answer you. So all those links are right there on the website.
I encourage everybody to go. I had mentioned up front that you have done more research on this than anyone else I know. I was not lying. And they can, I think it can also be very energizing for somebody to really learn the situation they're in, how to go through it. And it seems sometimes futile to even try. But I think the stuff you have out there really can give somebody so much hope. But more than just the hope, the actual skills or even tools to get through it. And we'll be right back in about 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business show showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact GoingSoloDirectory.com.
Hello and welcome back to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This is the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman, and I have Tracy Malone, who, as I mentioned earlier, is probably the biggest expert I've ever met relating to narcissism, contentious divorces, how to handle them, how to come through them, and be a thriver, which I think all of those are great. I just want to recap a couple things that we've covered because there's a lot. Firstly, we spoke a little bit just about what is a narcissist and what is a contentious divorce and the things to contemplate. We spoke through some of the buzzwords and being careful, I think just generally being careful in throwing buzzwords around, especially when they don't always apply. I think sometimes that happens too. why narcissistic divorces are so tough, the items to consider when divorcing a narcissist that you have. You mentioned some of your checklists. We mentioned the mistakes that is the number one on your list of top 10 mistakes, which we're going to get into. But two things that you mentioned as we were leaving for the break was communicating to your attorney and goals. And those two words are very, very big for me. One is, I think that before people hire an attorney, and this is not just if they think that their spouse is a narcissist, they really need to think about what do they want at the end of this, their priorities and their goals. They need to communicate that when they're interviewing their attorneys and make sure that they align. Using your professionals appropriately and having the right professionals, I think, is enormous. And so I think giving it a little bit of thought, is this going to be contentious? Why do I think it would be contentious? That in itself would highlight being able to communicate that. You may, as you mentioned earlier, Tracy, you don't always have the words, but knowing the general concepts, being able to have that conversation as you're interviewing that attorney, I think is a very, very important piece of that contemplating that we were speaking about earlier. And I do want to speak about what types of mistakes people make. The number one on your list that you had mentioned was don't call them a narcissist. That is going to rattle and rile them up. You have a top 10 list. There are definitely more. I'm going to pick one or two, if you don't mind, and then I'm going to have you pick one or two, and we can talk about them. But one of the things that I thought was incredibly insightful, I run into this quite a bit. You call it falling for the Trojan horse.
Mm.
And I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit. And I will say, I do see this where people really don't want to share information. They want to get it over quick. And that in itself should be a red flag. But I'm going to ask you to elaborate even beyond that, because this is one that I do run into quite a lot.
Yeah, thank you. So the Trojan horse is a tactic and a strategy that narcissists use during divorce to get you to stop proceedings, to get you to, okay, let's just try to work it out. Let's go to therapy. Let's go to this. Let's do this, right? These are all the promises. And you want, if you were blindsided by the divorce, then you might want to, oh yes, let's try, let's go to therapy, let's give it a shot, right? But that's always a tactic to slow things down and to get more time for them to hide more assets. So while you're busy, if they even last very long, going to therapy, which never really works. If you're busy with that, you're not noticing that they're hiding assets, that they're, strategizing, that they're planting smear campaign, things about you to people, telling them what a bad parent you are. And all of these things are going on behind the scenes while you're thinking that, oh, we're in therapy, we're going to try to work it out and it's going to be lovely, right? Those sound like such a nice thing, but two things happen in therapy with a narcissist. Either that the therapist sees them for what they are, calls them out on it, boom, off with your head. You'll never see that therapist again, because the narcissist is going to want one that they can control. So if the therapist sees them, mine did, and well, not the one, not the later therapist, but the therapist my husband and I went to, he called him out on it, and I'm never going back there. He's stupid. That's the end of that, right? And that's how it ends. But when you get one that actually sides with the narcissist, they're so charming. Narcissists are generally, even the most grandiose, they're very charming. So they turn on the charm to the therapist, and all of a sudden you're the one that's the problem in the relationship, and the tables turn, and you're never going to win at that, because the therapist can't even hear what's really going on, because the narcissist has charmed them, and the therapist is sitting there like making you into the bad person. And again, you'll usually end up leaving that therapist.
And I will say, just in general, if they want to quickly get this over with, they don't really want to show you assets, show you statements, show you what there is. I think that is an enormous red flag for you to say, this person's not dealing justly with me. As much as they tell you, I would never hurt you, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to be fair, you just need to know that that is an enormous red flag. So that was my, I don't want to say my favorite, but the one that really jumped out at me as one that I see possibly more than the others. Not that I don't see the others with my clients, but another one that I want to talk about, because I think in some ways it can be related, is believing the gaslighting. Because again, there's the sleight of hand, there's the deception that comes with this, and they controlling the message. So I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on the gaslighting tactics.
Sure. So there's so many parts. So gaslighting is a psychological strategy to make you think that what you saw, heard, or know is not true. So it's a confusion factor. It's there to control you and keep you in line in many ways. So before a divorce, or as it's starting, the threats that you'll get from a narcissist are gaslighting. There's no money. You'll never see the children if you divorce me. And, no judge is going to give you the kids, and you're crazy and everyone's going to know it. And those tend to reel back the marriage. Again, we go back into the Trojan horse. When you're gaslit like that, you freeze and you're like, I'm never going to get the children and there's no money. And you just give up and surrender. So the gaslighting can postpone the inevitable of the filing. And often, if we tie in the Trojan horse there, this is where they are now getting their ducks in a row, where they are, quitting their jobs. They are too distraught to work, and they're taking money out of home equity loans so that when you do sell the house, there's no value in it. So that, again, all the strategies are happening because they're gaslighting you, and that's to take your power away.
And I think, with that, one of the things that they've done, this isn't all of a sudden that they start to do these tactics. These are things that generally have been part of your world for so long. So it's, as we said, you either desensitize, you start to believe. And when they paint this incredibly bleak picture of what your life will look like. You won't have kids. You're not going to get any of that maintenance, what used to be called alimony. You're never going to get a mortgage without any of the stuff that I can give you. Your life is going to be miserable. Everyone's going to know who you are, and all of a sudden you are so terrified that you don't know what to do but cave.
Yeah. And that's their goal. Their goal is to put you into the fight, flight, or freeze mode, where you're unable to take the actions to get to a lawyer, say to hire a lawyer because they've locked up the funds, things like that. Again, it's all part of the gaslighting, and it's dangerous because people who don't know that's gaslighting truly believe it. And I have in my book and on my website to go and look at what your rights are, unless you are like beating your children and have been arrested for it, you still have rights to your children.
Right.
And, the things that they're accusing you of, do they hold value? You have to know your rights, because that's how the gaslighting loses its power. Because if you don't really know anything about divorce, then these things that they're telling you are going to freeze you into not taking any actions until they get their ducks in a row, and then off with your heads, and you're in the field and you don't even know what to do because you thought it was going to work out.
All right. And I wish we could go through all 10. We just do not have time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read them all, and then I'm going to ask you just to pick a couple and elaborate on them. But at least people can start to think about when they hear this, right? So obviously we've covered don't call them a narcissist. That was number one. The magical thinking, and if you want to elaborate, but the things will be okay. Believing justice will be served. Thinking walking away is easier. Fighting battles that don't need to be fought. We spoke about the gaslighting. We spoke about the Trojan horse. Not planning for the children as they grow. Not planning for the gray areas. And the details and consequences, the what if they don't do things. So, and there's a bunch more, but not knowing their rights, not building a support team, these kind of things, are all parts of your list. Pick a couple, because I could go into all of them, and I'd love to go into all of them, and it might be show number 2 that we do to finish the list. But just to wrap it up, or round it out, I should say, let's pick a couple and go through them.
Sure. So one of the most tortured thing about a narcissistic divorce is that it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's not over because you sign the papers. Often they don't do what they're ordered to do. So again, sell the house, give them your share. You take out investments for, take out their share of the investments and give you the money. All of the things that they're ordered to do often don't get done. So preparing for the consequences, I have a chapter in my book called The Gray Areas of a Divorce Decree. You have to bookend everything. Christmas is not just you get them this year, I get them next year. It's Christmas starts at 9 a.m. on this date and ends this time, and everything has to be very detailed. But what if they don't? I have a clause in my book called "What if they don't" clause. And the reason I created this and had a lawyer write it for me was I was in a contempt of court hearing with a client of mine, and he was ordered to pay 2 years before, sell one of their rental properties and give her $300,000. Now we're in court 2 years later. She's filed motions to comply, motions to compel, motions of contempt, and it's cost her $20,000 to that point to get him to do what he was ordered to do. So I'm there, and the judge says, "Sir, you got to pay or you're going to jail." And believe it or not, he was representing himself, and he went, "Well, how long would I go to jail for, Judge?" And she's like, "Forever." And then the lawyer for my client stood up and said, "Judge, can we please ask that he pay her $20,000 in legal fee, because, he was supposed to do this 2 years ago, and why should she have to pay?" And the judge put her hands together and said, "I would love to, but it wasn't in the first decree." And so as soon as we got in the hallway with the lawyer, I'm like, what should have been in the decree? And it's basically a clause that protects you, that if they have to go back to court like this woman did, then they will be responsible because they didn't comply to pay your legal fees. That stops post-divorce abuse. Trust me, they just want to bankrupt you. So if you can kind of nail that down and protect yourself by just having a simple line in your divorce decree, that's going to stop a lot of the post-divorce. So to me, that's the most important thing, because it's going to keep on giving and giving and giving, and you're going to go back to court 100 times fighting over things like, can we get our kids pierced ears? And you're going to court for it. It's silly, but.
And I just got to point out, one of the things I tell a lot of my clients on the finance side, let me read through the agreement before you sign it, because there are a lot of games like that people play that you can't really go back and enforce. For example, the one that I run into all the time is maintenance will be paid at, pick the rate, $7,000 a month. Okay, great. But what the narcissist will end up doing, because they love to torment you, is we're coming up on April 1st. They'll pay you on April 1st. They know you rely on this maintenance payment. They won't pay the next one till May 31st. And they'll let you stress it for 60 days. Mm-hmm. And then the next one comes 15 days later. And the next one comes whenever. You never know what's going to happen. And they can torment you as long as that lasts by playing these games. Mm-hmm. So I am very, very keen on seeing that kind of detail in these things. It also prevents misunderstandings. Even if the person's not a narcissist or not playing games, people misinterpret things if they are left very loose. So I think that's incredible information that people need to take into account. I'm going to ask that you pick one more, as much as I wish we could be doing a lot more than that, but we will again.
Well, I think the parenting plan is also another really big loophole that often, because of the contentious factors of getting to that point and finally signing the decree, is that people surrender and just sort of go, okay, it's not worth fighting to find out about what we're going to do about this or that. They just give up because it's been so hard to get 1 inch. So, really making sure that the parenting plan is as solid as it can be, thinking of everything. And, I've seen 2-page parenting plans and I've seen 200-page parenting plans, and there's a huge difference. You have boundaries. I consider a parenting plan a boundary document, and that's the most important thing for people to understand. If you don't have it in writing, it's not the law, and nobody's going to help you when they take the kids for Christmas and don't return them for 3 weeks, because it doesn't say when Christmas ends. So get yourself in a place where you are doing the right thing for the children, because most people, I say, well, do you want to pay now or do you want to pay later? And the other thing,
and I will say, just another quick example of that is Memorial Day, Labor Day, all of these. What is that? Is that the whole weekend? Is that just the Monday, right? These are it sounds so obvious, but it's not.
Yeah. And if you think about the money you have to put in to fight for and try to get this is an 18-year, plan. This is something that is going to last for a long time. I tell people, I'm like, so how much was your wedding dress? And I'm like, okay, I spent $4,000 on a wedding dress. How long did you wear it? One day. And then it went into a box, right? And if you were to invest that in your children's future, outlining everything that you could possibly think of, lawyers don't necessarily give you all the options. They're like, oh, Christmas, New Year's, well, they don't have the energy for it. So get and read a lot of books on parenting plans and know what your options are so that you can put together something that's going to protect you.
Very, very important. And we need to protect the kids in these situations as well. Tracy, I'm going to ask if you can share again how people can get in touch with you, get to that website before we wrap up, please.
Sure. So you can reach me at narcissistabusesupport.com and all my social media, and everything's all right there.
Again, narcissistabusesupport.com. Yeah, I recommend everybody goes there. Tracy's website is really, really jam-packed with such amazing insights and information that anyone can learn from. And I recommend that you go there. And thank you again. This is not an easy topic for everybody to talk about, especially somebody who 7 court cases and years of this being part of their life. Not everybody can open up the way that you have. So thank you for that. It's very beneficial to me, and I'm sure everybody that's been listening. Tracy, thank you. I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please reach out to me through my website. That's lifecycle.financial. Again, lifecycle.financial. You can reach out for questions for me or for Tracy Malone, our expert today on dealing with contentious behavior and narcissism. Thank you again. Thank you, CC Schatz, my producer, for making all the magic happen behind the scenes. I hope everybody has an amazing week. And remember, please, again, 4 weeks from today is the tax filing deadline. Please get it in. The IRS does come after you if you don't. Thank you so much. Have a great week.